The elements against us are strong, but we are stronger. Those entrenched in agriculture tell themselves there is a job to be done. A thankless one, a heart-wrenching one. A job where they must be hard and unwavering in their determination to deliver year after year. Yet, one that requires them to remain soft and flexible in their approach to succeed. A job that demands them to maintain a delicate balance between risk and protection at the same time. A job where they will pay freight on both supplies purchased and goods sold. One that requires a staggering amount of mental, physical, and emotional strength. One that provides for complete strangers with no expectation of recognition or credit. A job that deserves the utmost respect, as we couldn't live without it, but one that rarely asks for it. And when asked why these men and women choose to continue to do such a job, they humbly reply, "If we don't do it, who will?" Those lucky enough to consider themselves entrenched in agriculture are tough. They are resilient. They are action takers. They see firsthand the new life that spring rains and the warmth of the sun bring. They cultivate, incubate, propagate, and nurture. They shed tears of joy at the sound of a drought-ending rain, or the sight of a newborn calf, lamb, pig, or goat. They are willing to do the smallest, unappreciated tasks that, often unnoticed, are key to the success of the operation. They conquer trying times with their heads held high, and at the end of the day, take their axes to the grinding stone to return to battle even better than before. Day after day and year after year. We as a nation cannot flourish without these men and women. And together we can say, the elements against us are strong, but we are stronger. December 31st, 2019. Chinese government confirmed treatment of an aggressive infectious disease in dozens of patients. At the time, unaware of the true extent of the disease and its unstrangled rate of transmission, These cases appeared during a time when millions of travelers visited the nation. The disease spread quickly, and less than a month later, the first confirmed case was reported in the U.S., infecting a traveler that had recently returned from China. On January 30th, the World Health Organization declared the situation a global health emergency. A day later, U.S. President Donald Trump restricted entry of any individual that had recently traveled to China. On February 11th, the inexplicable disease coined the name COVID-19, quickly becoming a household name, yet one that will not as easily be forgotten. The first COVID-19 death in the United States was reported on February 29th. On March 15th, all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 U.S. territories had reported cases of COVID-19. As infection rates continued to grow, the CDC urged gatherings be limited to 50 people or less, which was quickly reduced to 10 people or less. School closures across the nation rapidly followed. Children, teachers, and parents were forced to complete the remainder of the school year at home, which came with its own set of grueling challenges to overcome. One day later, the U.S. led the world in confirmed cases of COVID-19. 6.6 million people applied for unemployment the last week of March. In just a few short weeks, nearly 10 million Americans lost their jobs, and millions more embraced the adjustments of working remotely. By late April, the death toll had surpassed 200,000 worldwide. By May, the U.S. economy truly began to feel the sting of COVID-19 as stay-at-home orders were imposed across the nation and businesses closed their doors to the public, many indefinitely. By the end of the month, COVID-related deaths in the U.S. reached more than 100,000. During the beginning of summer, several individual states continually set new single-day records for most confirmed cases. By midsummer, U.S. as a nation set 7 records in 11 days for new confirmed cases. U.S. COVID-19 cases nearly doubled in the month of July alone. August 22nd, the global death toll exceeded 800,000. Exactly a month later, the U.S. death toll stretched to more than 200,000. On October 11th, the world recorded more than 1 million cases in a single day. By fall, restrictions had narrowed. Many schools had reopened their classrooms to students and staff. The economy slowly regained traction on the road to recovery. Operating at a limited capacity, businesses and the nation were reluctantly adjusting to the new terms of business, school, work life, and entertainment. December 11th, the first COVID-19 vaccine was approved for emergency use by FDA. 3 days later, the U.S. had crowned the unwelcomed milestone of 300,000 deaths. January 2021 arrived with hope that we could put a year of devastation and heartbreak behind us. The U.S. continued to ease its way back into a more normal state of affairs. Mask mandates were lifted, gathering limitations suspended, vaccinations made accessible, businesses were granted the ability to operate at near normal levels, and cases remained in decline compared to only months earlier. But before we could celebrate the near normalcy of 2021, we as a nation not only had to survive the disease of COVID-19, but all the relenting unease and uncertainty that was a product of it. Spring of 2020, when the number of U.S. COVID cases were few but growing, rural life seemed nearly unaffected. Away from the cities that faced the early onset of the disease, while focused on cultivating and producing what they had worked the previous 12 months to create, agricultural life didn't seem to change. Even with the stay-at-home order in place, much of the agricultural workforce was deemed essential. Many unrelenting employees provided their skills and services to continue to feed America, a job that they were committed to. Animals still needed tending to, crops still needed maintained. Production agriculture seen its first blow to regularity with the shutdown of the food service industry. While fast food chains and some food establishments remained open, working overtime to continue to serve customers curbside and by delivery, this demand was not enough to keep up with the unparalleled proven efficiencies of American production agriculture. With production measures already established from months of previous business and management decisions, high-quality, sellable product that was ready for processing, such as pork, milk, eggs, and vegetables, were instantly deemed waste. There was nowhere for the raw product to go, no one to get it there, and no one to process it into sellable goods for the increasingly hungry American consumer. Baffling and difficult for the public to grasp, farmers began to dump milk, euthanize livestock, smash eggs, and pile vegetables in the field to rot. Meanwhile, food banks, grocers, and local markets were unable to keep enough product on the shelves to feed their communities. Lines of those in need grew longer and longer each day as unemployment continued to climb. With a limited supply of goods, consumers seen retail prices rise to all-time highs, further impeding the prosperity of many food insecure Americans and their families. It was estimated that nearly 1 in 4 Americans were unsure where their next meal would come from. Food insecurity is defined as insufficient or inconsistent access to enough food to lead a healthy and active lifestyle. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reported that 13.7 million families, or 35 million Americans, experienced food insecurity in 2020. Before the onset of COVID-19, the rate of food insecure families in the U.S. was in decline for several consecutive years. The beef industry was also deeply affected by this disruption. Just months earlier, in summer of 2019, a fire at the Tyson beef packing plant in Kansas created the first significant void in beef processing. Fast forward to 2020, with limited social distancing, COVID-19 cases began to soar inside the major meatpacking plants. These processing plants across the nation continued to become hotspots for COVID-19 and were subsequently shut down. Without a skilled workforce at large, the processing of beef cattle nearly ceased. By the laws of supply and demand, due to a restricted supply, retail grocery sales of beef nearly doubled. Americans witnessed $8 to $9 ground beef. Ground beef represents an estimated 45% of total U.S. beef consumption. With prices rising, many were unable to afford beef as well as other commodities in limited supply. Feeding America predicted an additional 17 million Americans had trouble feeding themselves and their families as a result of the pandemic. People tend to fear their insecurities, their perceptions, and the unknown. Fear and uncertainty drove abnormal purchasing behaviors as grocers couldn't keep shelves and coolers stocked fast enough. The limited supply of goods from disruptions in production and transportation also kept shelves unusually bare. As consumers continued to see bare shelves, many of their purchasing habits continued to originate in fear, purchasing more than normal or unnecessary items just in case. The adoption of a fear-based buying mentality led to consumer purchasing limitations for items such as toilet paper, cleaning supplies, proteins, bread, and milk. These restrictions were welcomed by those receiving government assistance. Oftentimes, WIC-approved items were the first to fly off the shelf. With other items remaining in stock, these individuals were unable to use their benefits to bring food to their family's table. The USDA Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and Women, Infants, and Children Program provide critical nutrition assistance to lower-income Americans. SNAP benefits were increased by 15%, or roughly $27 per person, to help balance the rising cost of food during the pandemic. WIC increased its annual budget by $500 million to combat food insecurities in families with young children. Dairy farmers dumping milk was especially hard for those food insecure families with young children to accept as a reality. These food gaps and shortages of staple items were simply an inconvenience for some, while for others, it determined if they set food on the table that evening or not. The perfect storm was created with so many Americans unexpectedly unemployed, an incredible disruption in the food supply, and an outlook that was bleak, unclear, and that drove consumer changes based on fear and uncertainty. The U.S. economy and many of its industries were greatly affected, if not devastated, by the wrath of COVID-19. We continue to mourn the lives lost during these times. We also continue to battle our way back to our jobs, our stability, our normalcy. As we reflect on our shortcomings during a time of crisis, we must also rejoice in even the smallest of victories. Local news media was inundated with instances of communities coming together in the aid of others. Farmers gifted bags of potatoes, vegetables, and fruit to the public. Food banks received processed pork to distribute to those in need. And producers donated local beef to school lunch programs. The lamb market increased awareness as consumer palates were forced to expand and try new products, therefore gaining a new, valuable base of customers. While agriculture's vulnerabilities were exposed and made evident that we had overestimated our immunity to such adversity, the dreadful year will hopefully become a catalyst for necessary reformation in individualized food systems. A greater appreciation for high-quality, fresh, and nutrient-rich food was observed as produce was increasingly perceived as medicine for personal health and wellness. As we seek to hit a moving target in the recovery of an unexplainable situation where the effects of the past year continue to unfold, our opinions remain absolute. American agriculture is strong. It is essential, and it is indispensable. While the elements against us are strong, we remain stronger.